Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you have questions, we have opinions. I don't know if we have the answer for you, but we'll do the best we can. If we answer those questions 7 days a week, 5 days, we record them on during the weekdays. So go ahead and throw your questions in. Of course, you can use Mukana and you can ask questions. You can vote on questions. You can chat about questions. If you're not in Mukana, don't worry. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask those 24/7, and usually within the next day or two, we put them in. So askofficehours.global. Go ahead and throw those questions in, and we'll file them in again, sometimes the same day, sometimes in the next day or two. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And who's reading today?
That would be me, Alex.
Courtney, we have for those on the back end, we have this little, we have a little document, and I looked over, there was nothing in the document.
It was blank.
It was blank. So I was like, maybe I'm reading. All right, go ahead, Courtney. What do we got?
All right. First question in comes from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. And he says, we use an LED wall for our stage backdrop. The graphics look great until we put up the purple one. Why does the color purple show up blue on a camera, or Sony PXW-Z150, when all the other colors are right on target?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, purple is notoriously, this is why it was the royal color, because it's notoriously hard to reproduce, especially in dyes or printing. It's been because it uses complementary colors of red and blue. And the proportion of each mixed together can greatly shift that hue of purple to one side or the other. So depending upon the LEDs in your LED wall, those individual LEDs may not have, may give a different brightness for the same voltage. So it has to be tuned very carefully. And the difference between the sensors in your camera can shift purple, blue, or red, depending upon the differences of each of those two. So it's a very careful line to get purple right when the others are a lot easier to get right.
Yeah, one of the things I would look at is it may not only be purple. You may find that it's anything with the red channel. So what I would look at is building gradients with different other primary colors and build an image to analyze this. And you may find that things in a certain wavelength inside of the red, a certain percentage of the red isn't being represented very well. And that's might be what you're seeing there. So play with that a little bit as far as look at it against green and blue, but look at many different options there. And you may find that there's a pattern there that isn't just purple. Next question.
Next question comes in from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. He says, thoughts on the portable data transmitter Sony just released. It supports 2 SIM cards, and he has a link there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I did take a look at this. It's very interesting. It's designed to go in the back of a camera. Somebody has it up there. Alex has a picture of it up. It supports 5G, and it supports LTE 5G, both in millimeter wave for really high data transmission and the sub-600 5G. So it'd be useful for use in venues where you have that millimeter wave, so you could connect. I guess it would kind of take the place of a PepLink or I don't know if it does bonding between those two or if it's just failover. I think it may just be failover between those two SIM cards. So that would be interesting. It has 3 types of input. It has USB-C, it has gigabit Ethernet, and it has, I think it's gigabit Ethernet, and it has HDMI inputs. And so you can transmit any data from any of those inputs. And I think it has an internal battery. I was looking carefully at the specifications. It says it has failover battery from 2 different external DC sources, but I think it may have an internal battery. It also has internal memory of, I think, 256 gigs, and you can expand it with a micro SD card to 1 terabyte for buffering and internal memory if you want to just store your information before it is transmitted. So it looks interesting. It's about $1,100.
I thought it's funny. It says, where did it say? portable data transmission for creators. And I was like, this is not a creator rig. like that was like, so I thought it was an interesting.
That's one heck of a phone that guy's carrying.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, now a lot of people have been talking about doing these for quite some time. And so these are, again, with 5G, the bandwidth could theoretically be there. And one of the things to know is that there are carve-outs in some of these venues for the 5G has so much more control over routing. And so there can be carve-outs for 5G for just broadcasters. So there's a potential that this one would be able to jump onto specific outputs that aren't generally available. So you may not be sharing the bandwidth at a venue with everybody else at the venue. And so that 5G connection could be more useful, but it also could work in a more pedestrian or consumer perspective. Next question.
Next question comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Douglas asks, the Sony PDT-FP1 can stream to my RTMP server or even directly to services like YouTube. Wouldn't you want to make a more reliable protocol like LiveU's LRT for mission critical events?
Yeah, I think it has a couple different protocols, but the RTM, but this one is, I think this with HDMI, with non-locking USB connectors, I think that's something that Mickey pointed out. He's not as interested. But I think that for a creator, I think just being able to go straight to YouTube from this small box that you can create. I think the hard part is how many creators are actually doing live streaming, I think is the challenge. You know, live streaming is pretty difficult, and we don't see a ton of creators doing it from locations. We do it from locations, but we know somewhat what we're doing on how to do that. And even for us, it's a pretty big lift. And so live streaming from a location is can be very challenging. And I'm not sure how many creators are doing that right now. But I think it's an interesting puzzle. This is going direct up against things like Teradek. Teradek has a variety of tools like the Prism lines and so on and so forth that can do a lot of these things. And I think that's what they're competing with. Next question. Sorry, I keep on forgetting that I'm not the panelist.
All right. From John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. He says, I use 3.5-inch spinning drives and a single USB enclosure for archiving files. When is it time to upgrade to a NAS enclosure? And what does the panel recommend? What RAID configuration, etc.? Thanks.
Jesse?
I'm talking about this from an archiving perspective. It's time to upgrade to NAS when your projects don't fit on one drive. That's when you want to move to a RAID. And when we're doing archival, we do not stripe our drives. And what striping does is it lines up a bunch of drives and treats them as one drive and puts your data segmented across many of them. The problem with that is if one drive fails in that array, the whole project can be corrupted and you kind of lose all the data. So when we're doing archival, we get a big drive, we get 2 of them, and we put the project on 2 drives, and the second one is the insurance policy.
Jeffrey?
So what I do with my RAID is I make sure that I have at least 4 drives in the RAID configuration. I use a program, and the name is escaping me for some reason right now. I just had it in my head. Anyway, the whole point is that you can, whatever you choose, you can put together a box, have 4 drives in there. You want to do RAID 6 with 4 more drives. Actually, it's better if you have 5 to 6 drives in a RAID 6 configuration, which means that 2 disks could fail. And if those 2 disks can fail, you can replace them and still have your data come back. So that's always a good thing. And it really depends on how much data you have. My system, what I have is I have the main backup, which is here. And then I have my old Drobo, believe it or not, which I have in a storage locker. And I'll pull that out every now and then because you want to make sure that it still keeps spinning. But if that was to die tomorrow, it would not be a big deal. I could then use something else to do a double backup. But I do multiple backups with a lot of my data.
Go, Jason.
You need a NAS when all of your backup needs to be all online all of the time, and or you're switching files between lots of devices. And as far as RAID configuration, Synology Hybrid RAID, I think, is a pretty good mix of efficiency and speed. And to that end, I like the Synology DS1522 Plus because it lets me have 10 gigabit Ethernet, and it's pretty cheap.
Yeah. For archiving, and I think of my storage in three buckets. There is the online, which I want to be as fast as possible, and usually fast as possible is 2 gigs a second. Like I don't build drives that are less than 2 gigs a second. For online, because that's how fast I need to get to that data. Then there's nearline. These are things that I want to be able to go get, and I don't want to have to run around and try to find things or whatever. And then there's offline. I keep typically no more than 16 terabytes online because I just don't have any projects that get bigger than 16 terabytes at a given time. As soon as I'm done with that project, I put it into nearline. And, that range is, right now I think I have about maybe 40 terabytes or 48 terabytes or something like that in nearline. That's stuff that I'm throwing over there. I keep a bunch of stuff actually on Frame.io. I probably have 15 terabytes or 20 terabytes on Frame.io that I can pull back up for a client if they ask for it. Very, very quickly and not have to find it and transfer it. Then you have offline, and typically with what we did, it just depends on how important this data is. But for Pixel Core, we had about 2,000 drives. But what we did is when we finished a project or finished a set of projects, we would take whatever there was always a size of a drive that was the right price. You'll see a hockey stick in the cost. I think right now that hockey stick is at like 12 terabytes or something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. And so we have two of those. We'd fill them up, and we would fill those two drives, just the raw drives. We put them into what we call a toaster. We have two of them. They put them in as individual drives, and we copy the original to both. We don't copy to one drive and then copy to the other drive. We copy the originals to each one of those drives just in case there was a write error. And we would fill those drives up. We would index them. That's all you got to do is index them. There's a variety of apps that will index it's not copying anything. It's just copying all of the file locations. Then we would put them into you can buy these little cases that make them look like cassettes. We put them on the wall. And we had a scheduling system so that we do a search on each one of them about every 6 months, just to keep, as Jeffrey said, to keep spinning the drive every once in a while. So we put those in. And we could find anything we had done for the last 8 years inside of maybe 15, 20 minutes. Because you go into your index and you just go, where is that drive? And that was an enormous amount. It was petabytes of data that we could go grab. I know some people like to use tape. I find DLT to be extremely slow, and I've lost enough data on it that I didn't manage by people who knew what they were doing that I just decided I didn't want to use it. I don't do that anymore because I don't have that much data. But when we did it, I'm not saying that you couldn't lose data. I'm just saying that we never did. So we, and it was kept in, they weren't moved very much. It was kept in a relatively cool area. It was refreshed every 6 months. And we found that to be a pretty successful way to be able to hold on to a lot of data. Next question.
Next question comes in from New York City, and David Brady says, today during the 7 o'clock hour segment of Good Morning America, the national weather insert was delivered from Phoenix, and the critters making a racket in the background was annoying. Would noise reduction suppression be able to fix this?
Courtney?
Yes, probably. If you're talking about cicadas, that's one of the most annoying noises that is out there this time because the brood is alive.
I don't think cicadas are in Phoenix, though. They're all
maybe they're not in Phoenix. It's maybe too dry for them. But he doesn't mention what kind of critters, so it's kind of hard to answer that question. Are these, who knows? Maybe they're crying bears in Phoenix.
I think that, sure. Yeah, I think in Arizona, I don't know as much about Phoenix, but I think it's a lot of crickets.
Well, maybe crickets. Anyway, there's especially for if you are having a problem with cicadas, cicadas can be extremely loud, up to 110 dB, and they're fairly broadband, as are some crickets and other insect noises. I did find Isotope RX has plugins for noise removal, which could do this. There's also Broadcast from NVIDIA that requires an RTX board, fairly recent RTX board, can be applied to do the real-time noise suppression. So those tools are available, and in fact, there's a video that I found online on YouTube called Removing Insect Sounds with Isotope RX Post-Production Suite. It's in the Westlake Pro session, so take a look for that. There's a whole hour-long demonstration video on how to eliminate insect sounds using isotope.
And as far as live goes, you may find some success with a cedar box, for a live experience. So you probably wouldn't be able to do it with the I think it's the NS2. You'd probably have to go to the original cedar where you have individual controls. So they have a larger cedar that allows you to attenuate all of the ways that it's trying to pull voice out. Cedar is really designed specifically around removing voices. And in general, I would say that the sound devices, noise assist in an average setting will do better than the cedar. But I will say that the cedar has their DNS, it's DNS1, I think, has sliders that let you attenuate it. And I think that you could theoretically attenuate some of that in a pinch. Of course, it was designed to, I think the original design was for it to be able to do that in real time while managing a phone tap. Anyway, next question.
Next question comes in from Mark Sanderson in Chesterfield, in the United Kingdom. Did anyone see Greg's Gadgets review of the XReal Beam Pro Android phone with special video cameras designed to work with their XReal glasses? Any thoughts on this?
Guy?
So I have the original Beam, which looks like this. Now they have this new one that actually has cameras in it. So it looks like a phone, and it shoots spatial video. It's not super high quality, but for what it is, it's also a player. So you can have it has its own little environment where it's the Nebula OS, and they're competing with the Apple Vision Pro. If you haven't seen them before, these are what the Nreal Airs look like, and then you plug your USB-C cable into the end. So it is a cable device. So this is super lightweight, and it's paired with something this small. So it's pretty nice in terms of being able to carry something around that's lightweight and not have this big honking thing on your head. So I haven't got to play with the Pro yet. It seems like it's a winner for $199 because just this Beam was $119, and this one does a lot more with the camera and the ability to record internally. So I'm excited to get one.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, it looks pretty neat. This is the best Vision Pro, just blatant knockoff that I've seen so far. I think that they got tired of people asking about cameras, so they just decided to build one, and to exactly their specs.
Just to make sure we don't bury the lead here. The big thing that is interesting here is this this new one. This is important. That means that those cameras are at their interaxial distance is much closer, if not exactly the same as interocular distance for a human being. The stereo coming out of this on paper should be significantly better than the iPhone 15, because the iPhone 15 has these two right here like this. In addition to that, the iPhone 15 is doing it with a lot of trickery, so basically a lot of computational photography to take one of the lenses and match it to the other lens. And they're doing it, and we're talking about that in the second hour. So this is something that's very applicable to what we're doing. But this is pretty exciting. It's unfortunate that they didn't go a little further to the 4K. I would have paid twice as much for the 4K version of this. But basically, it's doing a left and right eye that is at the right distance. And a lot of us have said, oh, this would be really great to take an iPhone. So I have one here. And at least, put another lens over here to get closer to this interocular distance. Because, one thing that, I'm very, very excited. Obviously, we have Marcelo coming on in the second hour, and I'm very excited about that product. It does give you this spatial experience, and it's a very comfortable spatial experience, but it's not as spatial as it would be in person because of this one limitation, which is that those lenses are a little closer together than what they could be. And so that's a really interesting. A lot of us have hoped that we would see someone bring out a camera that would easily do that for $200, especially if you can I mean, I'm hoping that Marcelo is not just preparing for the second hour, but looking at this, because this could be a really inexpensive delivery method to the Apple Vision Pro as well, because it's probably just capturing a side-by-side that just needs to be combined together. So anyway, so I think that I'm actually, I admit, when I saw the question go by, I was like, another XReal, blah, 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 blah. If you already have it. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, like look what they're doing. So those lenses being apart is pretty exciting. So hopefully we'll be able to get a hold of one and maybe test it. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, as generative AI becomes more valuable for those with disabilities and neurodivergence, could its use be as accepted as the wheelchair? For example, Anthropic's application process bars AI assistants to evaluate personal interest and communication skills.
Jesse?
Parsing and understanding medical applications is really what I think is most exciting about these large language models. What you're asking about, though, opens up two huge concerns in my heart. The first is a liability, and the second is hallucinations. So if you're neurodivergent and you're leaning on AI to help you communicate what you're intending to communicate, when there's a miscommunication, where does the liability fall? Is it on the AI model, or is it on the neurodivergent person for using this as a wheelchair to help them communicate in ways that they might not be able to communicate naturally? The second one is hallucinations, and this is born from the fact that these large language models are all based on biases. Like they're incredibly biased. You put in a prompt for what a toaster looks like in Midjourney, it searches all of human biases to find out what a toaster is, and it feeds you a toaster. To have a medical application, especially in neurodivergencies, spitting back these biases is very dangerous, very, very troubling to me. So those are my from the heart opinions. I'd love it if someone else jumped in.
I think that I do use probably one of the few places that I do as a production area use generative AI is to write letters that I don't want to write. So there's definitely letters that are kind of like I consider them filler, and they've got a bunch of words, cover letters for things and everything else. It's got to have all the basic information, but no one really cares. So I give it the highlights. I say, write me a cover letter for this, or, it's usually for things like, things that I find extremely tedious, so I know it's not really what you're asking, but I'll tell you how I use it. I look at I look at things that like cover letters for RFPs, I find very tedious, just like, who cares? Like, let's just get into what we're doing here. And I got a bunch of slides for you to look at. But if you don't send that cover letter, they won't look at it. So you give it all the information and you say, okay, write this thing. And then you read through it and then you make a couple changes to make it feel more personal and you send it out, And so, and I think that it can give you kind of a bland, not going to make any major errors, kind of thing. So if that's what you're looking for, it might be useful for that. But I think that having it go into any deeper than getting rid of bland, stupid things that we shouldn't be doing anyway, I think, I'm not sure I don't know if it'll be that useful. Next question.
Next one comes in from Chuck Hodges in Tulum, California. Please know why questions about these specific liminal products, product development choices, had to be asked again, even if there weren't IT restrictions on Macs. It's not a good budget option to just buy a Mac Mini for over 100 rooms to keep ZoomOSC. What then? And this came in via QR code, this question.
Chuck, I think you might be the only person I know using 100 copies of ZoomOSC. so I think that's the problem, is that most of us, and I'd love to hear the work process for that. Most of us use ZoomOSC to, one here, one there, to make decisions. Tying them into that way may not, I'd be very curious how you're using them in that environment. So also, generally what we've seen as a pattern with Liminal is that things show up on the platform that make the most sense, where they're able to innovate and move things forward, and then they slowly find their way to everything else. And so I don't know if it's going to be a permanent situation, but yeah, I'd be more curious about how you're using them for 100 rooms, or whether that's a theoretical idea, because I don't know anybody that uses more than a couple in one place. Next question.
Next question comes in all the way from Kingston, Jamaica, from Clive Lunford. And he says, I recently found out I can view scopes in OBS. Please state the importance of scopes in live production. And how can we tweak production protocols to maintain consistency in the look over time?
I'll go, Jesse.
The importance of scopes cannot be overstated. Scopes are half your image. So when you look through the viewfinder on your camera, what you're getting is kind of like the artistic readout of what you're trying to build, like the framing and the look and the feel of it. When you look at the scopes, that's the truth. That's the actual information of where your highlights are, where your mids and where your lows are. And if you're not reading scopes, you're not looking at half of the information, and possibly even the most important half of your information, the technical side of your information. Regarding the second one, I don't have a quick answer for that. That's like a lifetime career question, I believe.
Yeah. So if you look at he posted this here, and it's great. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Hold on. Maybe I can't. Hold on. There we go. The one that there's a couple things that I look at when I look at scopes here, and this is a pretty good example. So these are some of the scopes that Clive found here, and I think they're kind of mostly the same here. So we'll just stick with this. So there is one of the things is there's a nominal line that you'll see going in a vector scope that's kind of going this direction. This, regardless of what your skin tone is, it's really how the blood in your face looks to the system. So you'll see a line going out this way, and making sure that skin tones are kind of on that line definitely means that that's a quick, easy way to make sure your skin looks correct, and that things don't look like they're a little off. Now, if you get artistic, it may look different, but to be generally safe, that's the thing to look at. Now, this is the RGB parade. We use it heavily for green screen, but we also, when you look at the general image, you can start to make decisions about, these things should be neutral, and are they even across all of those colors? But also, you'll see how this red is higher here. If this started to peak over the top, in a general scope, it may not look like it's peaking, but in this one channel it is, and you'll start to see things flatten out because of that. So being able to see the individual scopes here and anything that may be going too high, and also you oftentimes look at the black levels. The black levels, one of the reasons that we were able to kind of figure out that there was a black crush on the Blackmagic cameras was because we were noticing everything was just slammed up against the bottom there. And so as you move your lift up, you'll start to pull it away, and sometimes you have to crush it a little bit to get it back down at zero. So and then the false color, what false color oftentimes is really useful for is, especially in a challenging lighting environment where you have you're outside or whatever, being able to turn something on and it just tells you I'm in the, these purples and blues say you're probably underexposed there. Green and gray typically is you're within reasonable exposure, and your yellow and red tend to be you're overexposing. You're able to very quickly look at your image and go, I'm safe. I'll be able to correct this into something, or I can see, if I'm shooting, I can very quickly see it. And so that's what those scopes are typically used for. Next question.
Next question comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. He says, when recording to cloud services such as Dropbox, do you also want to have it in the workflow to have a local recording set up as well?
I go, Jesse.
We have it in the workflow to have multiple local recordings. We hang out around 3 local recordings.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
When you record to Dropbox, what's happening is Dropbox is constantly talking back and forth and sending that broken file back and forth. Early on, there's been many situations where people would use Dropbox and their recordings would get all mangled up because of this. So one way that people counter that is to actually just go into the settings and say, hey, make sure that this folder is on the hard drive as well, but it still can always cause a problem. So with that, I would say yes, you would want to have another source backing it up without having it go to a Dropbox.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Got to record it. You got to record locally. Don't record only to the cloud. Next question.
Next question comes in from Kevin Young in Everett, Washington. He says, I just finished watching ATEM Audio2, went back and registered to ATEM Audio1. First off, great segments, and thanks for the info. My first question is, can an external limiter be added to the ATEM program audio that is being streamed? And this came in from our QR code.
Jason? Can't hear you, Jason.
No, if the ATEM is doing the streaming, then you would have to get it out and then somehow put it back in, and then you'd segment it out. So no, not really. Kind of. You would limit it before it got in. So you can't limit it once it goes through the AD converter. There's nothing to limit there. If it's going to overmodulate, it's going to overmodulate. But you could put a limiter ahead of it. So, for instance, if you took this mix pre and you pushed it in, you have a mix pre 3. If I pushed it into there, it would, or if I used, there's a variety of tools that have limiters. And if they have limiters and then they have an output that is conducive to going into an ATEM, could go in there, like the mix pre 3s have great limiters. And so you can have it being limited there. And you're really doing most of your mix there as well. So you'd be then delivering that file back to the ATEM. So you could put it in ahead of the ATEM. You can't do it after or in the ATEM. So that's where you would limit signals. Next question.
Next one comes in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. It says, currently I have an iPad Air 2020 and looking at this new 13-inch iPad Pro. Logic Pro on the iPad looks very cool. What other uses in production make this purchase worth the high price point? And should I go for the Nano-texture glass?
Jeffrey?
So if you've got an iPad Air 2020 and you're fine with the iPad Air 2020, you don't need Logic Pro, then stay with the 2020. However, if you really want some more experience, you can do a lot more with that. Final Cut Pro is another example. I've been using a program called Top Director, and the cool thing about this is it becomes a software switcher on your iPad, and I used this last week with these NDI cameras. And so basically what I could just completely get rid of the computer, the laptop, and then have a more portable experience of switching between cameras with that. So there's a lot more because there's a lot more power in this machine. And of course, it's also USB versus lightning cables, so you can hook up things like external drives. As for the Nano-texture glass, that's a special glass that helps with glare. So if you're using the iPad like on a show or something like that, and you're pointing a camera directly at it and you have another light behind there, it won't shine the light on the iPad, so you can get a clearer shot of the iPad glass. However, it's also a very sensitive glass, so if you're not using a microfiber cloth to it, you could possibly scratch the glass. So if you're using it out in production, the chances of you scratching or damaging that glass are a lot greater than if it stays in studio.
Yeah, I would never do the nano glass. I have one iPad that has the paper texture on it, just like a little sticker on it that makes it feel more like paper, which I love. But I would never commit to nano glass and actually pay for it. I have to admit, I use my iPads all the time in a pro environment. I use them in productions all the time. I don't know if I think one's a 2020 and the other one's a 2021 or 2022. And I'm thinking about getting the new one. I'm mostly interested in, I don't think I have one that's capable of using the new pencil. I'm far more interested in the pencil than I am in most of the other things, because there's a lot of tools in there that I think are really interesting as you start to do builds. But, so that's the thing that would drive me there. And I think that the new Air uses the pencil as well. So I'm looking at buying the Air, which is a lot less expensive than the full one, because I just don't think I use it that much there. I think about using Final Cut and Logic on my iPad. I just don't actually do it. And I will admit I haven't installed them because I have become very sensitive to subscriptions, even from Apple. Like, I just don't want to pay for any more subscriptions. And I know it's only $5 a month, but it's just everybody's like little piranhas just constantly pulling $5 a month away. And so I think the problem that I have is that until I have a reason to use Logic Pro or Final Cut Pro on the on the iPads, I just don't see any reason to put it on and start paying $5 a month. And again, it's more of a principle thing than a real money thing. It's just that I'm kind of I'm very aggravated about subscriptions. It's like, and I'm getting more and more aggressive about killing ones. I look at everything through this kind of hard-nosed, am I really using this enough to make it worth subscribing to? And I'm cutting off lots of subscriptions. It seems like every week I cut one or two of them off. I'm trying to get down to like just the things that I absolutely need. I think that developers should really think about going back to single purchases because I'm really become kind of edgy about it, and so there are ones that I'm using regularly that it's okay, but I'm not gonna. But every little app being a subscription is really annoying. Next question.
Next one comes in from Roland Booth in Jamaica. What are the best head-worn microphones, full kit, including transmitters and receivers, would you recommend for presenters on platform, broken down into 3 pricing categories? Less than $500, I guess $500, and above $500. That's 2. Yeah.
There's 2,
and maybe way 3, above maybe $500.
Yeah. So go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we'll start with the really expensive one. That would be the Shure Axient line with the Countryman H6 or DPA 6066 core those are the super top end. And it depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to sing or is it just spoken word? Stepping down a notch, you get into some of the lower end, Shure, the GX line. There's also Sennheiser. And then at our church, we're using some inexpensive Audio-Technica. That's the Bluetooth stuff that's it's decent if you're trying to get under $500. You compare it with a less expensive model of head-worn mic because they don't typically come with any mic, so you have to add either the lapel mic or a head-worn mic. And I actually ran into the same problem. I was watching a lady at church as she was talking to the cheap lapel that they bought, and it sounded so horrible. So I actually need to get the new cable. So that's the nice thing about these H6s from Countryman is that I have this one wired for electro, but for $75 I can buy the Audio-Technica version of that cable, plug it in, let them use it for the services, and then pull it back into mine. So it's nice having that capability to swap out if you need to use it in various systems, or hardwire if you need to use it straight XLR.
Courtney?
Yeah, and I didn't know. Maybe I'll ask Guy to expand. I haven't shopped in this area recently. I was wondering if the questioner wanted to know about transmitters and receivers on the body. In other words, instead of the receiver of just the microphone, if he's got in-ear monitors.
I think he's assuming
in-ear monitors for use for return audio or not. Whether he wants that included or not.
I think he said presenters, so we're just assuming a presenter there. Although I will say IFBs for presenters is amazing. Like it's so great. I would say that there's a couple different options there. As far as I agree with the guy that Axient is the highest quality transmission that you're going to have. It's the one that we use when we absolutely can't have it fail. Again, there are a variety of other ones that are less expensive than the Axient, although I believe the Axient over the last, I think it was 5 years ago or whatever, the price dropped in like half per transmission, per channel as they went full digital. And so I think that Axient is the highest quality there. Another one that's kind of in between, especially if you're doing a lot of presenters that we find very convenient, are the Microflexes, which is also from Shure. Quality is not as high. They don't go as far, but if you're in a smaller environment for doing presentations, it depends on the kind of team you have, but these are really convenient. You plug them all in, you hit a button, and it reorders the numbers. It's Dante only coming out of the receiver or the transceiver. It has a talkback as in the belt pack. It has an IFB and the mic input, which is super convenient for presentations. And what we do is we use things like Ear Heroes and other things that are single ear that you can pop in, and they're just extremely thin lined going back. And it allows us to do all kinds of error correction with speakers if necessary, which has been really nice. And then, of course, again, I have a lot of the DPA 4066, but I think the 6066, as Guy said, is probably the highest end. And then I also have a lot of Countrymen as well. Next question.
Next one comes in from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And he says, the rate of obsolescence for office hour recommendations gear is staggering. Case in point, the XReal. What do I do with my old XReal now that the newer 2-lens XReals are out and will soon become outdated as well? eBay, Craigslist?
Jeffrey?
I'll take it.
There you go. Send us Jeffrey.
Yeah, perfect. I'll take it. So, no, the reality is that, we live on the high echelon of technology, so we're always getting latest and greatest. I was in an Uber a couple weeks ago, and the person driving was using an iPhone 7, and she loved it. She didn't have any reason to switch otherwise. There's people that would never be connected with XReal at all. So if you hand it down, if you sell it, those are some things. Just keep in mind, if you're selling it, then I don't like selling things because I feel responsible if they break once they get it. But if I hand it down to somebody else, like another family member, I don't have a problem with that, because if it breaks, oh well, that's too bad. You got it for free. And of course, if I get products sent to me, then I send them off to somebody else, and that's also deals with taxes. I won't get into that too much, but the whole point is that getting it out of my studio is just as important, because then I just get a lot of clutter. So go ahead and hand it down. There's going to be many people that love to have that product.
I'll go, Jesse.
We donate pretty much everything we don't use anymore.
Jason?
Yeah, pretty much that. Libraries will take them. Nonprofits, schools are a great example. School districts will certainly take this kind of thing. And it's an opportunity to build a relationship.
Just don't drink as much beer. I don't even know if Paul drinks beer. But I'm just saying that the amount of money, like if you think about these things, this is like, for an average person, maybe, or an average American, maybe a quarter or 6 months worth of beer. So just stop drinking, and then you'll be fine. Next question.
I think you could just add it to the wall of depreciation behind Alex.
Exactly. I have a wall of. I'm no longer throwing them away or giving them away or selling them. I just throw them on the wall in the back.
That's right. Roland Booth in Jamaica has our next question. He says, if I want to set up an OBS machine in the cloud for encoding, which provider would you recommend? Is anyone here providing such a service?
A good guy.
Yeah, AWS would be the number one, followed by Google Cloud, and then Azure would be the big three. If you're looking for a Mac, which I know Alex doesn't like OBS on the Mac, but I would say, what do you need to do? Is it another app like Mimo Live or something that can run? Because with the first three that I mentioned, you're going to get charged what's called egress fees. So any video that you send out is going to be charged as a data. So in addition to having the machine on, that's one fee. Then you get charged for all the data that goes out. So if you go Mac Stadium, that is all you can eat, $109 for a Mac Mini. So if you could use something like Livestream Studio, Wirecast, some other app, FFmpeg, depends on what it is that you're trying to do. You can just spit it in, spit it out, no egress charges. So I'd look for a provider that doesn't have any kind of egress fees, and that way you can stay in the under $100. And then Shadow PC, if you could get around the VPN port thing, then maybe there's a way that you can get your feeds in and go the Shadow route on a PC.
All right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Doesn't Streamlabs also have a service like that? I believe.
They may. Yeah. So I think that he was looking really for an OBS machine on the cloud, and I think that if they're looking for a service provider, if you're talking about just the cloud provider, I think AWS is the most common. One where I think probably 80-90% of the people that I know that are doing it in the cloud are using AWS. Next question.
Wait a minute. I think I hear Cochran coming in from Guy Cochran in Seattle.
Cochran, he drops back. He drops back. He's under a lot of pressure. He throws the ball down the field, and he catches it. He got out of the backfield. He got past the front line into the secondary, and he's running down the field. He's going to go for it all. Go ahead, Guy. What do we got here?
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, he says, following up on a question from last week, 4 1080p HDMI feeds into a 4K quad, into SRT, into vMix in the cloud. I bought a quad for the test. Do you want to see it? He asked. Yeah.
No, we're not that interested. I think we just move on. Yeah, we don't have. I'm sorry, Guy. We just don't have enough time today to
we don't
look
talk
at cool
about
things.
boring stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you got? What do you got?
All right. So I bought one of these things that we had recommended on the show. It's a 4K HDMI quad box, and basically these are used for video walls and whatnot. But I had recommended for this gentleman who wanted to do a sporting event, how would you send up the feeds in sync? So when you have four feeds, you can this is one 4K image that you can use this converter box that's taking four HDMI ins and converting it to one 4K. Now I'm using that Zowie box that I had also recommended. So this is the Zowie backend, and in that I'm going with a 2160p 30 input. It won't do 60. That's the downside. If you want to do this with 1080p 60, it's a whole different ball game. For the output, 2160p 30, and then it's H.265 3840 by 2160, and I'm sending it at 12,000 the bit rate's at 12,000, so it's pretty high, but that's four feeds, and so I've got that going out. SRT, you can see it streaming here. Live SRT is on, and I'm picking that up here. And now once you get those feeds up, you got to bust them back apart. And thanks, Chad, for helping me with this. There's a little cogwheel down here where you can click and you can say create virtual input. And then when you create these virtual inputs, you can position them and zoom in and slice them up and dice them. And then you have the ability to switch. If you're in vMix, you can go here to position, and you basically just zoom in and position pan and until you get the feed to where you want it to go. But that's the gist of it. Is it works, and for $150 for the encoder, a 4K encoder for $150 that does SRT. And remember, all those feeds. So I was watching Alex's football, soccer stuff over the weekend. Remember, these are 4 feeds coming up in one frame, all the way up to the cloud. So they're perfectly in sync. They're not delayed. They're all arriving because it is the same frame. So $150 for the encoder, $200 for the quad. So in it, $350, which is just it's mind blowing to me that you could do this for $350. It's crazy.
Now, the one thing I'd love to see, oftentimes when we get into those less expensive ones, is to look at what the encode quality is of those. So doing kind of the kind of testing that I talked about yesterday, which is to run that feed out with frames on it, take it back to the original, put it over top of the original, set it to difference, and just see what the difference looks like compared to other ways of compressing it. That's really, like, I know that we saw some of LiveX's tests. I don't look at tests until I see that test. Like that's to me, like I don't need to, I'm not going to guess. I just need to see what those two sandwiched together are. I'd love to test that. So if you're doing more testing, it'd be great to start testing things where we take an original ProRes file and we start putting it out on different ways of compressing it. That's super valuable. Like, let's take these and put them over top of each other and see what the differences are. We'll ruin everybody's viewing experience of everything, but that's what really makes a difference, in my opinion.
I can tell you it looks pretty dang tight just off the top of my head, just looking at the basic. I just set this up last night and started finishing it off this morning right before the show. Right. In the past, I've used a Wowza Clearcaster that cost $4,000 to achieve the same thing, and it was H.264, and it required 24,000 or 24 megabit. So this is half the megabits because it's able to run the H.265. So it's actually really clean. So we'll see though. I'll do the difference test, but visually for what it was versus some of the other encoders that I've seen on the market, it's pretty cool.
It's awesome. It's very cool. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says Switzerland is turning off analog FM radio by the end of 2026 and moving to digital audio broadcasting, or DAB. Is the legislative path for AM for every vehicle in the USA going down the wrong path?
Go ahead, Courtney.
No, I don't think so. I think they're maintaining the legislation aimed at keeping AM broadcast or AM receivers in cars has to do with emergency broadcast. And the difference between analog broadcast and digital broadcast is such as we all learned when our television transitioned from analog broadcasting to digital broadcasting. With analog, the signal degrades gracefully. In other words, when you're on the edge of reception, you just start to hear a little noise, then you hear more noise, but you can still make out the content of an emergency broadcast signal. With digital broadcasting, you drop, a certain number of bits beyond the error correction of the receiver, and you get nothing. So you can't hear any broadcasting if there's, for example, if you're listening to satellite radio and you pull inside a parking garage, your satellite radio goes away. It doesn't just get noisy or make it harder to hear. So AM broadcasting and analog broadcasting is basically the carrier of last resort as far as broadcasting emergency broadcast signals. And that's why the U.S. is mandating it. I think Switzerland may have some other system for transmitting emergency broadcast over some type of analog or shortwave.
I mean, compared to the United States, you could practically walk around and tell everybody what needs to be done. In Switzerland, it's so small. so compared to, so the
it mandated a town crier then.
I just made a whole bunch of people in Switzerland very upset. So it's a wonderful country, by the way. I've gotten to fly over on a helicopter, which I loved. Anyway, so the I think that I do agree with Courtney. I think that we're going the right direction. They may be going the wrong direction. Having some kind of broadcast that's available to all cars and not having it be digital is, I think, may be found important at some point. Go ahead, Jesse.
And this is not things were better back then. The ROI on AM radio is astronomical. The return on that investment is so good compared to every other broadcasting method.
Yeah, people can be crazy. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jamaica, once again from Roland Booth. Says YouTube stats for nerds feature. Can the team provide their explanation of the volume per normalized feet?
Go ahead, Jason.
Sure. It's actually this weird concatenation. So volume is wherever your volume slider is at any given moment on the YouTube video. Normalized is the percentage by which YouTube adjusted the playback volume of the video to match its loudness standards. And then the last one is content loudness, which I think is just that adjustment in aggregate.
By the way, when you look at, I wanted to say one last thing about what we did, and I don't usually go back to a previous question, but I realized what I was about to say and then I didn't say it, but I'm going to say it. When you look at people getting rid of analog signals, there's usually a business reason, and it usually has to do with telecommunications wanting to sell that for profit somewhere else. So the reason that they're taking it away is not because they don't think it's useful, but because they think they can make more money at it. So like that, and you should never look at any of these as we're trying to improve the quality of your life. We are making the quality of your experience lower so that we can make more money. That's how you should look at every time that they reslice these things, because all the 5G stuff has eviscerated our wireless wireless mics, eviscerates all kinds of, it's causing all kinds of trouble for the airline industry, and it's also they can sell us something that we didn't need. Next question.
The next one comes in from Ken D. Rieker, in Bryan. During yesterday's discussion on AI, Alex made a passing reference to a Rick Beato video comparing human drumming to the Lin drum. Can you please provide a link?
I think that it's in one of his I think it's one of his newest ones. It's The Real Reason Why Music is Getting Worse. It was produced 6 days ago. So if you go to YouTube here, you're going to see it as the second one. And right after I Know You're Angry, So Am I. I don't know where that one went, but the one that The Real Reason Why Music is Getting Worse, and this is just in Rick Beato's on his YouTube channel, and it's a great YouTube channel. You should subscribe. You should watch all the videos. It's required reading. Next question.
From Neil Avalito in Boca Raton, Florida. What software is recommended for HD indexing?
I think he means hard drive indexing. Go ahead.
Hard drive indexing.
Jesse.
Thanks.
The software that we use for hard drive indexing is something called Disk Catalog Maker. This is what it looks like. It's all one word.
It looks like the website. It looks like the website was made in like 1995. It is the one that we've used in the past too.
Yep.
So-
That's it.
And the file is tiny. Like it's a tiny, because it's just little bits of text to just where all the files are, and it keeps track of them. And so, by the way, the one thing I didn't say in the first one that we'll annotate with this is naming conventions for your drives is really important. So, the drives were usually grouped by client, and then we have codes on them so you can easily find that code, and then we keep them in order. So coding your drives and making sure that you have a good naming convention and making sure that they're clearly labeled on the spine of the case, all super important. Next question.
The next one comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. Says, I want to use the Hollyland Solidcom C1 wireless headset intercom system in a ballroom to signal the roaming camera. Do you think these will work when the music gets loud?
Good guy.
They're not fully, like the what do you call them, double muffs that we would use in a rock concert or something. So these are built in. If you haven't seen them before, they look like this. Noah Sargent has these, and I've operated for him, and we've used these in not a super loud environment, but it was loud enough, and I was still able to hear all the calls. So it's kind of like what kind of shows you're going to be doing all the time. If you know that you're going to be in those rock concert style environments, and you're going to need something with a double muff, and that's when you're going to want like the Clearcoms or something, just with the more traditional headsets that are standard issue, or rent them.
And the other thing that you can do, and these may work. I think when you say ballroom, if it's not too loud, it may work. In really loud environments, oftentimes we try to go to in-ear. So we want to do an in-ear security style, and then we put basically oftentimes, very, very quieting headphones that you might use outside on aircraft style to block everything out for the operators. And then we have actually, for the loudest events, given the operators throat mics. So they just simply, if they want to talk, they can reach up like this. We don't want them to talk very often. So making it inconvenient is actually a feature that keeps them from chatting. And so but they can say, no, I can't do this or whatever. And the throat mics are pretty popular in more military applications, but they actually work really well for the camera operators as well. Next question.
Next one comes in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. Says, when dealing with ATEM SuperSources, what are the differences between Mix Effect Pro and Central Control?
Jason.
Oh boy, there are a lot, and they're both great products, and I use and like both of them. The primary difference is that Mix Effect Pro is designed primarily for the iPad, and Central Control is designed for one or more systems on a network. Other than that, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I think that Central Control is really something you're going to use across many different things, and Mix Effect Pro is definitely just the thing that you're going to use for your ATEM. So it depends on, and there's everything that you'd want to do. So you have, with the ATEM built into it. So I think that, if you're looking for an ATEM controller, I would probably use Mix Effect Pro. If you're looking to control your super sources and lots of other things, then Central Control probably makes more sense. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, he says, Guy, how does the Zowie box compare to a bird dog encoder? Here's a link.
I read that the first time as big dog encoder. I was like, what's a big dog encoder?
Bird dog. So
yeah, go ahead,
I own both. I have the Magewell as well. Each have their strengths and weaknesses. Right out the gate, the Zowie box is it's a Chinese kind of knockoff device. It's HX3 only. It is not full NDI. So be aware that that's the biggest thing, is it's not full NDI. And it also, as far as the frame rates, you're not going to be able to get up there. It also doesn't do SDI in. So with the bigger boys, you can get professional broadcast style connectors, and you've got also a beautiful back end. So the cloud interface is much more sophisticated. As far as the NDI in and out, it flows. I've been testing it. You can enter in a discovery server even with the Zowie box. So I'm impressed for what it is. I don't think I'll use them in professional environments, but just for testing stuff out right now, I'm having fun with it because it's cheap. I can get an encoder and a decoder on one of my AJ Key Pros for $300, which turns that device into a more usable device in the workflow that I'm doing right now. It's pretty cool to have sources. I could have 4 decks alive now that would have cost me a lot more money with time code and analog audio in. So it's pretty cool.
We're going to be talking about the Apple Vision Pro, streaming to the Apple Vision Pro in just a minute. Just a couple quick announcements. Coming up next, or coming up tomorrow, Llama Audio. This is something that a lot of us were really interested in, and I don't know how our team got Llama Audio, because I hadn't talked to them, but they got them on. They're going to come on and talk about their what we're really looking at is cloud-based, but it's a software-based mixing solution, audio mixing solution. Thursday, capturing HDR night displays. I don't know why on July 4th we would be talking about capturing HDR night displays, but we are. So we'll be talking about shooting fireworks and other things at night. So stay tuned for that. And then on Friday, we'll be talking. Jonas Dottel will be here to talk about WIP, WebRTC for broadcasting and live streaming. So we're excited to have Jonas on to talk about that. And remember, Saturday is Q&A for an hour, and Sunday is introspection, where you get to talk a little bit and ask about why are we doing this and what are we doing here and how is this working. So we'd love to have you come on, and those discussions turn out to just be a lot of fun. So definitely tune in on Sunday to talk about office hours itself.